and we will get started with Kinaidd Rabb. Take it away.
Okay, let's make sure this works, that I can actually share my screen. Share. Can everyone see this? Okay, so it's kind of weird. It feels a little weird to be presenting to the void, but for those of you who don't know me, my name is Kinaidd Rabb. I'm a composer, storyteller, world builder, and wizard. And I'm here today to talk about new music as themed experience. So without any delay, let's start. So what is a themed experience? It's a complicated definition. There's a lot that goes into making and presenting a themed experience. But the most succinct definition I've come up with is facilitated by an immersive narrative environment. A themed experience is an artistic medium that encourages personalized storytelling, rewards participation from audience members, and cultivates fandom engagements. So themed experiences include everything from theme parks, museums, zoos, aquaria, haunted houses, escape rooms, immersive theater, and more. There's many variants and many different things that qualify as immersive experiences, that from restaurants to large-scale festivals, to tiny little theater in a box that you can get sent to your address and do at home. There's a lot of different things that go into this, and anything can be a themed experience. So the theme of this new music gathering is money, ? And so so why are we talking about themed experience? Two important numbers. The first is 500 million, which is the attendees for the top 10 theme park groups worldwide in 2019. Which is about 6.5% of the human population on this planet. And the second number is $61.8 billion, which is the economic impact of the themed entertainment industry. Theme parks alone account for about $52 billion. The source of this is the 2020 Immersive Entertainment Industry Annual Report. So anything can be a themed experience, and you shouldn't underestimate audience members of themed experiences. Immersive and themed experience audience participants, they really enjoy participating. They really enjoy feeling like they're part of the story and feeling like they're part of the art-making practice. They enjoy play. They enjoy improvisation, actually going into the space, escaping, and becoming part of the experience, and they really enjoy trying new things. So themed experiences range from inspiring joy to invoking terror to recreating every other possible human emotion. Audience of themed experiences have made it absolutely clear that they're here for every kind of immersive experience. And so I'm not really here to talk about the art versus money dichotomy. Because it doesn't really exist when it comes to themed experiences. People are really here to try anything, and that media audience is really open to a lot of different experiences. I am not here to talk about the content of whatever music you make. I am here to talk about the presentation of that new music and the way that people package new music in such a or can package new music in such a way that will speak to an existing audience of immersive and themed entertainment, and packaging music in such a way that understands what the experience economy is. So let's talk about the experience economy. Whoa! So the first thing to understand the experience economy is to talk about the progression of economic value. So we start at the basic market and undifferentiated competitive position. So we start extract commodities, then making goods, then delivering the services, and staging experiences. The best example, and this comes right out of Welcome to the Experience Economy, is the idea of a birthday cake. So at first we made birthday cakes using commodities readily available at home, and then a few years later we would go to the store and buy a Betty Crocker cake mix and not have to use and just have everything in one box. Then we might go. Then a couple of years later, we're all really busy. We might go to the store and actually buy a cake made at the bakery. And then a few years later, we don't even plan the party. We go to a place that creates an experience for the birthday, for whatever birthday you're celebrating, and throws in a cake for free. That's so. So what we want to move from is extracting commodities to making goods to delivering service to staging experiences. And right now there are a few things stopping us in new music from really going full hog on staging the experience. So I want to talk about the 5 hallmarks of experience design. And the first one is theming the experience. It's really important to create an overarching theme for any experience because it will be what ties everything together. A good theme is short, succinct, and elegant, and it's what informs all the decisions about how we create the experience. So the second thing is harmonize impressions with positive cues. The best example of this is, again, right out of Welcome to the Experience Economy, and it's about the Rainforest Cafe. At this point, I would ask how many people have been to the Rainforest Cafe, but I'm talking into a void. It's one thing for a restaurant host to say, your table is ready. And that just provides you the basic information about when the experience is beginning. But at the Rainforest Cafe, they say, your adventure is about to begin, which reinforces the theme of the kind of adventurous, expeditious, into the rainforest sort of thing. And that is a positive cue that expresses the same information as just providing the straight up information that reinforces the theme. So. And then the next hallmark is eliminate negative cues. So instead of having just a trash can that says thank you, which is just providing a very basic service, you want to create something that has value within the context of the experience. Nothing should be mundane and normal. Nothing should interrupt the experience of the audience or spectator during any sort of immersive experience. And there are many examples, but anyways, mix in memorabilia. There is a reason that in a theme park you walk out through the gift shop because audiences actually want to have the opportunity to buy something, not because it is valuable or because it is because it has financial, not as a financial investment, but they want to create a memory and attach it to an object that they get from a performance or from an experience. So by mixing in memorabilia and providing things that people can purchase at the event that will create a lasting memory, you reinforce the theme of the experience and create and allow people to create memories of the experience itself. And the last hallmark of a themed experience is engaging all 5 senses. As new music makers, we're really good at engaging sound and hearing. It's our medium. It's what we do. But when was the last time you engaged taste? as part of your new music experience? How many of you think about texture of the seats, or texture of, or the sight, what you see while you watch new music? It's really important to engage all five senses, because that will make it so that you have that many more opportunities to immerse people into the environment and to therefore reinforce the theme. I want to talk a little bit about storytelling, because it's a really important topic to understanding theme park phenomenology, and it's really important to understand how music tells stories. Well, unfortunately, music can't tell stories. It just doesn't have that power on its own. Text can tell stories, and when music is paired with text, then yes, it can absolutely tell stories. But to understand why music can't tell stories, we have to kind of understand what story is. And story is actually an instinct. Story is the way that our brains process complex information, and it's an evolutionary construct that we have, a process that we have created that helps us navigate the world. So our brain develops a way to consciously navigate information, so that provided we have the time, we can decide what to do, on our own, what to do next. And so the most basic story is the if-then. So if I put my hand in the fire, I will get burned. You can understand how this would be an evolutionary process that we would need to tell story, to survive. And so that's the most basic story. That is the way that we should be thinking about story. It's not that we're telling the story, it's that people are creating story for themselves. So music can't tell stories, but we can suggest that it does, and expect that our audience's brains will automatically assign a story complementary to the music. It's for this reason that I allege that non-narrative art really doesn't exist, because in order for our brains to process it, we assign stories, we assign a narrative to whatever art we're presenting. So you can either control the story through a relationship to text, or in order to create an immersive experience of your music, you can suggest and encourage audiences to use their own internal storytelling capacity to assign a narrative to your work. We should talk about the proscenium as well. So the proscenium is an invisible wall that separates the audience from the performance. For those of you familiar with the fourth wall, that is the proscenium. In architecture, it's actually quite literal. It is literally the frame that exists around the stage that is literally a framing device. So the proscenium is a narrator in story-based media. It literally controls your perspective as you experience the story on stage, combined with lighting design and set and other elements of stagecraft. The proscenium in all of theater's derivatives, opera, film, theme parks, etc., the proscenium is present. And in opera, it behaves very much as the same way as theater. In film, it behaves, it's the camera lens. It controls how you view the story. In theme parks, it's actually the ride vehicle, because it controls how you look at the show scene. And so as the experience economy has emerged, the continued use of the proscenium in the presentation of new music is constricting what we do with it. What I mean by that is, since music can't really tell stories without a relationship to text, the proscenium's role is meaningless in the way that we've been presenting new music. It's not it suggests that there is a story being told on stage when there isn't one being told on stage. We are instead assigning a story to what is to the music using our own internal processes. And therefore, what the proscenium is actually doing is separating our audiences from the experience and making them feel deliberately separated from what they want to actually be involved in, which is the experience itself. So what do we do? One, we become active participants in the experience economy by shaping the experience of new music using the hallmarks of themed and immersive design. Two, when we're not telling stories as music makers, we work, or when we can't tell stories as music makers, we work to encourage audiences' capacity for storytelling. And three, we dismantle unnecessary proscenia and allow audiences to become participants in the experience with us. So here is some recommended reading. If anyone wants to take a screenshot, this is a very small list. If you want to contact me afterwards, I can point you in the direction of a lot more material. And let's do questions. So that's thank you so much for coming today, and I'm happy to take questions if I have time to do so.
Thank you so much, Kinaidd. And I just realized, thank you, Robert, for letting me know that I was reminding people to put questions on the Q&A, but I was only doing it to the host and panelists. So forgive me for that. Now, everyone, if you have any questions for Kinaidd, you can either pop them on the Q&A or, well, actually, this is a webinar, so you should actually pop them on the Q&A. And I'll make sure to relay the questions to Kinaidd. Or other panelists also, if you're curious.
I have a question while we might be waiting for some others.
Sure.
How would you go about expanding the number of senses within a music program, as you alluded to earlier, beyond just sounds?
Oh,
as
okay.
you're talking about, without necessarily alienating audiences who maybe aren't actually interested in modern music. They like sort of regular classical music, but we might be looking for a way of bringing in other senses or other experiences that don't necessarily go hand in hand with experimental music, for example. If you get what I mean. I
do. There are many ways of doing it. But the simplest is providing the simplest is sight, for sure. Taking a space and creating some sort of maybe not interactive, but immersive, duplicative, really, depiction of the music that goes beyond the ensemble playing it, but helps audiences engage that storytelling capacity. Touch, smell, and taste are a little bit more elusive. They're easier in the new music environment because we can create, we can create because we can create experiences that are very experimental, and that would be something that would be so those are very so that's like, so the problem is it's a really big question, and I don't really have the time to fully answer it, but but I want to assure you that it can in fact be done.
It's really interesting. Thank you. Actually, here in the UK, the Manchester Collective, who are a really great music ensemble, they've just announced a series of concerts with a local Manchester chef, which it sounds like it might be up your street. Anyway, thank you for asking that.
I just curated and currently am composing a musical menu called Pairings with a fellow composer, Jocelyn Chambers. She's composing music inspired by the food. I'm composing music inspired by the alcohol. So that's and there's a lot of different options we can do about presenting that will actually engage all of those senses. And we were really passionate about the project because and still are because of those opportunities. So there is a question from Hubert Poe.
There's we have a question. Do you mind if I read it really quickly?
Sure.
Just have you had any experiences with working with organizations, entities, or companies who specialize in themed experiences or experience design? And is collaboration with such organizations and entities recommended?
It's challenging because almost all of those companies, it's easier to work with individuals that work for those companies because everyone has side projects. But a lot of those companies plan 2 to 3 years out, or were planning 2 to 3 years out prior to the pandemic. They are now they're starting to a lot of the capital projects were canceled in the pandemic itself, but they are now starting to rebuild all of that process. I don't want to say the problem, but one of the challenges of working with themed designers is they're really busy, especially for the larger companies, talking about like Disney and Universal. What I would recommend is there are lots of smaller companies. A couple resources that I would recommend reaching out to are No Proscenium, which is a news source handling a lot, and a resource handling a lot of immersive theater. The Themed Entertainment Association is the widest directory of individuals involved in themed entertainment, the Here Institute, which is, I believe, attached to No Proscenium, is the institution that kind of keeps track of all of the elements of all of the elements of this industry. They are, if you're interested in doing themed or immersive experiences, those are some people to reach out to. There is a conference that is supposed to start up soon in Los Angeles, called the Here. The Here. I think it's just the Here conference. The Here something. It's all about immersive, and it's about how to and it's a good opportunity to network with a lot of the different people. So.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Kinaidd, for joining us. And I wish we could stay with you for way longer, but we're going to move forward to our next panelist, who's Robert Laidlow. And Robert has been having some internet issues this morning, but Robert was so kind to record their presentation. So I'm gonna play it from my screen, and Robert is also joining us. So after that, you can ask some questions.
Yeah, thank you. I am here. It's just that my internet is not very good, so I'll be here for questions, and otherwise you can enjoy me in this exactly the same position 2 hours ago.
Okay, we'll see you live in 20 minutes. Here we go.
Good morning. My name is Robert Laidlow. I'm a composer, researcher, and PhD student at the Centre for Practice and Research in Science and Music at the Royal Northern College of Music in Manchester, UK. For the last 2 years, I've been investigating the possibilities of artificial intelligence on orchestral composition with the BBC Philharmonic Orchestra. In this talk today, I'd like to introduce you to what AI is in a musical context, and what effect it might have on our careers, particularly as performing or composing musicians in the future. In every field, there's a lot of uncertainty about what effects AI and other similar technologies might have on the livelihoods of those involved. That's how I see my research fitting into this year's money theme. And sure, there are several legitimate worries and areas that we might want to be concerned about or keep on our radar for collective action in the coming years. I'll look at those in a moment. That's the sort of negative side to this presentation. But there are also an enormous number of positives to consider this technology in our practice. It promises the possibility of widening opportunities on an individual basis and diversifying the concert-going experience on a broader scale. Most importantly, the world is not going to move away from intelligent, digital, data-driven technologies. Through incorporating these technologies sometimes into our practice, I think we can use the environment of music as both a dress rehearsal and a reflection space for the world we're entering. This has, of course, always been one of music's great strengths, a place for consideration and exploration. This is a really big area and I can't talk about everything, so I welcome questions about anything I've mentioned or haven't afterwards. Just send me an email or a tweet if you don't want to ask in the question period. Okay, so what is AI? I'd like to start by giving a really brief overview of what AI is and what I mean by it, as well as specifically how it's employed in music. AI is just a name we use for technology, algorithms really, that can adapt and learn things autonomously. There's nothing magical or particularly special about this process. It's simply a series of mathematical functions. You can do AI or machine learning, which is the more precise term for what I'm talking about today, without using a computer, just using a deck of cards. The reason it has exploded in popularity recently is because our computers have become better at crunching through data. There's a lot more data in the world since the last decade. AI is used to do a specific task. I'm not talking about AGI, artificial general intelligence here, though there are some people working on that. Most AI algorithms are bound within very strict parameters and can't understand or infer anything not contained within those parameters. So to make that clearer, in the cases I'm going to talk about, it mainly learns from a data set like some music or a score, and tries its best to create something it sees as similar to that data set. It can't do anything that isn't in the data set, and it can't know anything beyond what's shown. There are other ways it can learn too, which I might get back to. Okay, so if that's what AI is, what might we need to look out for in the future? How does that affect the music industry in a concrete way? With any emerging technology, there are bound to be some areas of concern, and AI is no different. Of particular focus at the moment is the field of AI and ethics. Who gets to decide what AI is used for, and will it be regulated in any way? This goes way beyond music, of course. Think of self-driving cars, for example. AI ethicists are also interested in the replacement narrative of people's jobs being replaced by machine learning. We've seen lots of replacement narratives since the Industrial Revolution, but how credible is it that musicians might be replaced by machines? Well, in some cases, perhaps more credible than you'd think. The R&D departments of several large music streaming platforms, including Spotify and Google, have heavily invested in music AI tools. We also know that in the past, Spotify at least, have populated playlists, things like music to relax to, that kind of thing, with fake artists of their own creation, to whom they don't need to pay royalties, and sent those playlists to the front of the queue for listeners. YouTube too has a major issue with paying royalties, as I'm sure we all know. The clear next step here is automation of those background style playlists, depriving artists of their already scant royalties. There are several commercial enterprises that have been set up with the express aim of replacing composers in certain situations. Companies like JukeDeck and Avia advertise themselves as being able to automatically generate royalty-free music for adverts, background music, and even short pieces of film, where you can type in the rough emotional atmosphere you want the music to convey. Since this kind of program produces both the music and the audio, it also basically replaces performers. Specifically on the performance side, session musicians have long been threatened by synthesized sample libraries, and sample libraries have really found a home in the workplace of composers. However, since it can crunch so much data at once, machine learning promises to streamline the process of making these sample libraries sound indistinguishable from real. Actually, this is already happening to some degree with programs like Note Performer, which use AI to make realistic samples. All right, so that's replacement. But I just want to draw attention to another worry I personally have about the proliferation of data-based approach in the music industry. Data can only capture so much about a musical performance, as we know. It can capture sound waves, maybe images. It can know how a score looks on paper. or at least how it looks on a computer. But it can't capture the magic of live performance and the connection the audience feels with the musicians on stage. As AI becomes more prevalent in our society, I think we need to hold on to what makes music unique and special and try not to become too wrapped up in the aspects of music that a computer can see. We can see this trend already in other areas, the focus on quantitative data over qualitative data. If we don't, the music in the future might begin to lose some of its meaning as it is assimilated into the evolving universe of data and technique. Okay, so far so depressing. So let's all get our sledgehammers out and smash up Silicon Valley. Well, not quite. I want to ask as well, what are the potential benefits of bringing this technology into our practice? The answers, I think, outweigh the possible negative connotations of AI by a large margin. My answers here are drawn from my own compositions and research, and I'll reference these pieces as I go on, though I'm certainly not alone in having these views. One thing I just don't have time to talk about, but welcome questions on, is the possibility of new instruments powered by AI. I've used these in one or two pieces, and I think they're a really exciting direction for innovative performers and ensembles. Okay, on the whole, working with intelligent technology can encourage interdisciplinary collaboration, provide a space for classical music, in my case, to relate and be relevant to wider social trends, and it can help musicians develop new techniques and ideas that push their practice farther than ever. It's this combination of collaboration, relevancy, and musical daring that runs through all the points I'm about to make. I mentioned earlier that music can act as a staging ground or dress rehearsal for the kind of world we are moving into as intelligent technologies become more prevalent. But what did I mean by that? I think the music is actually really well placed to consider AI and its role in the future, because AI forces us to consider questions that musicians, and perhaps especially classical musicians, already think about. For me, there is one major example which I hope will make this principle clear, which I call future and past. By looking at how composers, performing musicians, and arts institutions can work with AI, we might be able to catch a glimpse of a possible future where humans are working alongside machines constructively in all walks of life. So what does future and past mean in this context? As I mentioned earlier, AI cannot meaningfully create music out of nothing. It needs to learn from music that already exists, an axiom that I think holds for human composers too. Data scientists use existing music, very often that of Bach, to showcase how effective their algorithm is. The more indistinguishable from Bach, the more the algorithm is deemed a success. As I alluded, the AI research with the most financial backing and computer resources is being developed to replace humans in certain circumstances. Crucially, it is designed to replace, not to improve. So in both of these examples, research and industry, AI needs to sound like what already exists as much as possible. This leaves us in the strange situation that this technology, which promises the future, is looking to the past to prove its legitimacy. But for us classical musicians, using the past to create the future is a pretty normal idea. So here is a relationship between classical music and AI. There's kind of a kinship and a difference in the way that they use the past to create the future. This is what I explored in the piece Silicon Mind for the BBC Philharmonic Orchestra, which unfortunately I can't play for you since the premiere was postponed until next year. So Silicon Mind, just to give you an overview, is about 15 minutes long and it's scored for a classical orchestra with a few additional instruments. We wanted to make sure it could fit in a program alongside music from that classical period. When I was composing it, I wanted to do two things musically relating to future and past. The first was I wanted to push an algorithm as far as it could go along the line of imitation to find its limits. And the second thing was that I wanted to create a piece that might make sense to an AI mind if it weren't forced to only imitate music of the past. I don't have time to go into this here, but it relates to the difference in how humans and machines understand musical time and how that might affect the way we perceive time in music written in the future, where humans and AI collaborate regularly. Okay, so on the first point of imitation and the limits of imitation, I used an algorithm called MuseNet developed by Christine Payne at OpenAI. MuseNet produces sheet music, and it can imitate a huge number of composers throughout history very effectively. I was fascinated by the way orchestral repertoire and cutting-edge technology meet through centuries-old music. I wrote a little bit of music and asked MuseNet to continue it in the style of Mozart. I threw out a lot of its responses, but many I developed along new lines, but some others I simply orchestrated and then asked MuseNet, the AI, to keep going. As it continually responded to itself, the music became more and more obsessive and singular and bizarre. I think there's only about 1 minute of directly orchestrated AI music in the piece, but it takes the work down a really weird rabbit hole that I don't think anybody expected. It certainly doesn't sound like classical music by the middle of the piece, though it does at the start. This all came from the idea of pushing imitation further and further, and just not stopping when maybe you're supposed to. Writing this for orchestra was really exciting and caused the development of lots of new techniques and ideas in workshops with players. If an AI were to create an audio file, it wouldn't be that exciting, but the orchestra physically messing with algorithmic imitation and musical time through instrument manipulation and cooperation turns it into something else. Okay, so that's a really small example of how musicians might use AI to connect with wider social trends and think about possible futures. If you want to hear an artist that does this in really interesting ways, I'd recommend the music of Jennifer Walsh. Now I'd like to hone in on the interdisciplinary collaboration aspect of this work. To truly work with AI in your music, you either need to be a genuine expert in data science, or you need to work with one. Usually, and certainly for me, it's the latter. This means that you get collaboration basically baked into any new AI-driven piece automatically. I'll give an example. So in 2019, I was commissioned by the Barbican Centre in London to write a new piece with a team of data scientists, historians, engineers, and others exploring the possibilities of AI in music. The piece was within a concert celebrating Ada Lovelace, the 19th century mathematical pioneer who postulated on AI before it was cool. The commission was for mezzo-soprano and ensemble, so one of the things to think about was setting the text for the piece. I wanted the text to be very closely tied to Ada Lovelace, but I didn't want to just set one of her own letters. Instead, we decided to use machine learning to produce new Lovelace-style text, training it on a dataset of her correspondence. Together with Oxford professors Ursula Martin and David DeRoy, we assembled several datasets of different sizes which a text-producing algorithm could learn from, before ordering them in such a way that it meant if you read the text, the final text, from start to finish, it uses more and more sophisticated AI as it goes along. It was very exciting working in this way. The text was often surprising and always inspiring, and the work we were doing is quite unique. There's something lovely about being able to tailor your AI to an exact project as well. It feels like we created something bespoke just for this Lovelace project. I'll play a little bit from Alter. This is from the middle of the piece, where the singer is in a duet. The text I've already explained. The music in this section was something I wrote and then got AI to continue and complete, ending up with one long line. I cut this line in two and layered it on top of itself to form a duet, which is sung by both Marta, the singer, and by her AI electronic doppelganger. Alter was a launchpad for me in my practice. It's exhilarating to not only use brand new technology in my work, but also to actually facilitate the creation of entirely original research in the pursuit of music. The process of collaboration in creating the piece is very distinct from the usual model, where a composer might work alone for long periods. If you're interested in collaboration in your practice, AI is a fantastic way of facilitating it. Finally, I'd like to make a brief point about how AI has impacted my practice in a solely musical sense. What has it made me think about in my work that I might not have otherwise? I'll zoom in on one piece I wrote, also in 2019, for the BBC Philharmonic, called 3 Interstastios. I just want to say I'll talk about only a couple of things here, but they are representative of an enormous number of small technical changes to my work that have resulted from using AI. This is the first piece I wrote with Christine using her MuseNet algorithm that I've talked about earlier. And during the collaborative process, we trained the algorithm on my own music. It was, in essence, trying to write music indistinguishable from my own. I should probably explain the title. An interstitio is a word invented by an AI trained on the dictionary. It means a short piece of musical metal, which I find really interesting and funny because it doesn't really make sense, but the algorithm has correctly understood that piece can be used in either context. I learned a lot about my own practice through studying the results of this algorithm and found the process of filtering my music through a unique set of ears, if you can call it that, really useful for putting my work into a new perspective. It also brought me to new structural ideas, and structure is really important in my compositions. The second movement, the second interstatio, if you will, is structured as a conversation between myself and the AI imitating me. I would write a few bars, then it would continue from where I left off in what it deemed to be my style. Then I would continue from where it left off, and so on. This is really interesting musically for two reasons. The first is that it leaves me, the composer, without fine control over the structure of the piece. I can't control where the music is going to go exactly. I can only do that during the sections I wrote. It creates a kind of ebb and flow which naturally moves to surprising places that I found really exciting, that I think is almost impossible to create if you're just working on your own. It's not like working with another composer either. AI has its own fingerprints and its own way of doing things, but also you feel like it's okay to change the notes here and there. It's a structure I want to return to sometime. This piece was really just a prototype. The second thing that was musically interesting was that MuseNet creates things in short score, and I had to orchestrate it. So in a sense, I was in control of the music, but also I wasn't. In orchestrating the AI's music, in my style, I had to sit down and analyze my own orchestrational techniques. This was a really useful exercise that I might not have had time to do otherwise. I'll play you a bit of this second interstatio. Okay, I think that's all I have time for, so I just want to say thank you for listening. In this talk, I hope to tell you a little bit about what AI is and how it is or might be used. I think it's a really exciting and fertile area for musicians, but one that comes with dangers as unscrupulous agents and corporations maybe may increasingly seek to use it to marginalize some people in the creative industries. I don't think this technology is going to be for everyone by any means, but those musicians and artistic planners who are interested might find it can help them tap into wider social trends and can situate music as an exciting vanguard of a future of human-AI interaction. I hope that my couple of examples showed you some practical uses of AI and how it might be useful for the portfolio of a 21st century musician right now. And I'm very happy to direct you to other people's work who approach it in an entirely different way to me. So thank you again. Great.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Robert. I forgot that that was a video.
Good.
It's good to have you now here in person. I don't see any questions on the Q&A, but if either other panelists or attendees have questions, feel free to panelists ask them, or attendees pop them in the Q&A.
Question from Garrett there.
Oh, Garrett. Yes.
First of all, Robert, thank you so much for sharing that. That's like super cool and really inspiring work. So thank you for that. Something I was thinking about a lot with the musical examples you shared of the work you've done that has collaborated with AI. And I guess it's in the one with the vocalist, you address this more clearly than in the one for ensemble, but what do you think about the issue of transparency for the audience of where the music is coming from in terms of like what you, like in the second piece, what you created versus what the AI created? And I'm just curious how you thought about that and what you could do to, in the one with the singer, they could hear the AI in a way, but I'm just curious what you think about that.
Yeah, that's a. I think that question depends. The answer depends on the composer and the piece in question. I don't think there's ever a hard and fast answer for that particular question. It is a tricky one because the AI doesn't necessarily write music in the way that we understand that. And so it can be very misleading to try and answer like a question of, oh, which bit did it write? Like which minute? That's not quite how it works. The kind of the way that I describe it normally is like the piece is a cake and the AI provides one of the ingredients. So one of the ingredients, but when you eat a cake, you don't notice which bit is the egg, but it's an AI egg in there, if that makes sense. To get back to your specific question, I think normally when I put on these pieces, I do try, and people are normally happy to have a bit of a pre-concert discussion where we address this exact question. Often audiences are allowed in. Sometimes these pieces have been broadcast on the radio where I've tried to speak about them a little bit with the presenter before. I think it's really important to have that conversation, not only because you want credit to be where credit is due, which in this case goes to Christine, the programmer who designed MuseNet with me, or for me, but also because people are genuinely interested in that question and they deserve to hear the answer. So I think, yeah, that kind of pre-concert discussion is really important, better than a program note, I think, because people don't always read them, and it can get quite dense quite quickly in terms of answers to that. Yeah, but it really depends on the composer, I think, and how they've used it. Good question, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Garrett, for the question, and Robert for the answer. We have another question here. Do you consider within the game to modify the AI's contribution to provide more meaning, or at least meaning beyond similarity of recurrent patterns?
Yeah, so I'm taking this question to mean that, when I was saying that second piece, when I received the output from MuseNet, whether I think it's okay to change some of the notes. Yes, the answer is always yes. It's your piece, or it's my piece in this case, and I think pretty strongly that I can do what I want with it. And honestly, personally, I think that anyone who strongly disagrees with that is maybe conflating the reality of what machine learning is, which is just math, as you would say, with perhaps a romanticized notion of what AI is. But to get to your question more specifically in that piece, you called it a game. I think that's the right term for it, actually. And I think it's up to you to decide what the rules for the game are. And sometimes I'm perfectly happy for the rules for the game to be, I don't touch it at all. But that's not out of some sort of religious zeal for the material. It's because I want to showcase that material in its original form. And I have done that a few times with like games for the audience, where it swaps between AI and compose in a more obvious way than what you heard there. And they have to kind of vote as they go along. So I guess the answer is I don't have any problems with that whatsoever, but stick to your rules to make a better piece in that way.
Great. Thank you so much for sharing. Ben, you have a question too.
Yeah, I had one other question, which was, do you have, I mean, working with this, like, do you have an opinion on where we're at in terms of like, I mean, I've thought about this quite a bit in terms of like kind of where I'm going. I won't have time in my talk, but like the implications, the economic implications of the use of AI in music. And I'm just wondering, with what you're doing, which is like pretty fascinating, like where are we at with like like the kind of horror story you hear, so to speak, of the AI that's just going to come and write a completely indistinguishable piece of music that audiences would actually want to listen to. I don't know if there's a loaded thing, but I'm just wondering if you had any thoughts on that kind of broader dangerous AI taking over music story.
Well, beyond the genres I covered in the presentation, I'll go more towards the sort of concert music end, if that's what you're asking about, where maybe people are coming to a concert to watch a piece rather than hearing music in the background. We're not there yet, but make no say, we'll get there. There's no doubt about it. It's going to happen. I think for me, I've thought about this a lot, as you might imagine, and the main thing for me is that actually there are two ways audiences can go on this. Like, either they want to hear a piece of music that's written by a computer because it's a novelty, and it is a novelty, and it is interesting, and that will have a place in our concert halls, I think. But I think most people who go to those kind of classical concerts, at least, and lots of other types of genres as well, they want to feel that connection with a composer or with a human force. And even if they've invented it or imagined it, it's kind of from the audience side, I think. And so I think that at some point audiences are going to have to make a decision about what kinds of music they will collectively accept to be written by a machine and what they won't. And it's my personal opinion that we're not going to see whole-scale replacement of concert hall type music, because people go there to have a kind of personal human connection. But that's not to say there won't be AI generated music in those concerts, but it will just serve a different purpose.
Great, thank you so much, Robert. Really fascinating, and I'm going to invite now Ben to come back, but as a panelist for your talk. So yeah, again, for audiences, remember, attendees, if you have any questions for our panelists, pop them out in the Q&A. And take it away, Robert. I mean, not Robert, Ben.
Yeah, hi. Do I do something here, or am I automatically, I mean, I can share my screen, which I was going to do.
Yes, please do.
Okay, I'm going to do it this way. Hopefully I remember. It's been summer break for me, so hopefully my Zoom skills are
no worries. We were just talking on the NMG text thread about how we're all super rusty on Zoom right now, especially after a week of in-person and folding chairs and things like that. So no worries, we're here.
Okay, so you see a slide, I assume.
Yes, we
I
do.
hope. Maybe I could share it better. I think this is the best way to do it, because I want to see my little notes for myself in a separate window here. Okay, hi. So now do I have to, am I the panelist? I'm the person that's like appearing here, right? Right now.
You are
hello?
the panelist.
Great.
Yes, and we can see you and hear you and see your
great.
Your presentation.
So hi, my name's Ben Phelps. I'm a composer and percussionist, and I guess somewhat reluctant small-time or really small-time record producer at this point. So I'm happy to be here and discuss. So what I'm going to be talking about today is kind of what I've been thinking about as part of my practice and doing this for a long time, and just like being a millennial, or I guess exennial composer, thinking about for a long time about how to release new music, whatever that means for us, recordings to the world specifically, not just in concert. And the economic problems therein. So like, I think it's pretty directly related to the theme of our the new music gathering right now. And when I say the economics of this, what I'm really concerned about and what I want to talk about here is not so much making oodles of money, but obviously that would be nice, but even to be able to record and release music in what I would call an economically sustainable way. Like, are you generating some modicum of income enough from the recording to make the recording itself in the first place? And suffice to say, this has become extremely difficult in the modern streaming digital age. And I'll just say right now, the way my little presentation here in only 20 minutes has gone, I don't have a ton of easy answers to this question. So what I'm mainly going to present is a kind of my framework for thinking about the macroeconomic forces that are at play here that cause this extreme difficulty. I mean, I think as musicians, we must at this point be somewhat aware of these the horror stories of Spotify royalty payments and how terrible they are, et cetera, et cetera. So I'm not going to go into a ton of anecdotes about that. It's kind of out there at this point that we know how bad it is. But I do think as music makers that are trying to do this and release music to the world, especially what I broadly call niche music, so not just classical, not just the kind of experimental avant-garde, but this can expand to other genres entirely that are just not going to be genres of music that are outside of the kind of classical tradition, but are releasing records that are never going to have huge audiences. They might have very small but very devoted audiences, but they're never going to have like huge mass market appeal. And these are the genres of music that are suffering the most and having the hardest go of it in the digital music economy, so to speak. And if we can understand these forces, we can at least talk and maybe start to talk about the kind of potential, largely political solutions we really need to be talking about here. Or at least if you're like trying to release music yourself in the world, you maybe can consider some of this for your business plan. So without further ado, there's my, I was going to put that up sooner. I did an actual CD because I'm old fashioned. I don't know why. They're elaborate, expensive business cards. Although some people buy them, and when they do, I make more money from this still as a small time record producer than I do when you stream the music on Spotify. Anyway. Okay, let's go back in time just a little bit. This is back to 2007. Lots have changed, obviously, since rapidly in the past 20 years of the music economy. But since the days of Napster, people have been making the argument that as music becomes freer and cheaper, not only is this good for the consumer, but it's also good for the music maker. And most of the disruptors of the music industry have used this kind of flowering utopian vision of a music industry without labels and gatekeepers to kind of justify and get excited about what they're doing. So what I have here is a quote from kind of typical, there is a whole genre of these technologists, cheerleaders, especially in the aughts, writing blogs at the time, saying stuff like this. So Bob Lefsetz, I don't mean to pick on him. There's like I say, there's a genre of this from the time. New music model is plain as day. So he's mainly arguing against CDs and how record labels need to give it up on CDs here. More music for more people at a lower price. And fascinatingly, this delivers more money to the producers. Not sure about that, but that was the thought at the time. But those who grow up in the CD world just can't fathom the change. The old fogies they just can't understand it. Time to move into the future, a land of riches. Although these old cats will get paid for music in their company's catalogs, they will not rule music in the future. Because not only is production and distribution available to everyone, they just don't get it. Now, this is partially true. Production and distribution is much more available to everyone. So that's not wrong. The money part of the equation maybe was misjudged a little bit, I would say. Now, I want to just compare this to a quote 10 years later, or from Spotify's IPO filing with the SEC here. So this is Daniel Ek, founder of Spotify, writing a very verbose letter here in his filing address, or it's just a letter that was included in the official documents. The old model favored certain gatekeepers. So this is, now Spotify had been around for 10 years at this point, but he's maybe rewriting his history a little bit and vision, but it's justifying the existence of Spotify and what Spotify is doing. So artists have been signed, artists had to be signed to a label. There are all these gatekeepers, et cetera, et cetera. Importantly, or the thing I want to harp on a little bit is the part I put in bold. We're working to democratize the industry and connect all of us across the world in a shared culture that expands our horizons. Now, some of that might be true. We might be a shared culture. You're not seeing my screen, huh? Thank you. This happens. Give me 1 second.
Now we can see it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, just now we could see the quotes.
If that happens again, let me know.
Yes, we will.
I think I know what I did that caused that to happen. So
we'll let you know. Don't worry. As you were.
Might be better if I share my whole screen, actually. Okay, I'm gonna keep going. We'll see if that happens again, but in the meantime, I'm gonna plow ahead here. So now, what have musicians thought of this? Did the slide change? That's the question I have. Is it updating the screen, or is it the old screen right now?
It is. We're seeing the.
You see
signs.
A picture?
Yes, we see a picture of the
Great,
protesters.
thank you. Okay, so here's a Spotify protest. This happened in March, actually around the world. This was the one in Los Angeles. I know there's not a lot of people there. This was in the height of a lockdown here in Los Angeles. And plus it's musicians. But people got very angry at some of the things Daniel Ek has been saying this year during the pandemic, obviously. And founded groups. This one is one, Julia Holter, kind of a new music adjacent artist, indie artist mostly, was a big organizer of this, and they did get the publicity. This was covered in the LA Times. This is a picture from the LA Times. So protesters out there demanding a cent per play increase in their royalty rate. I'll hopefully get back to that. Digital streaming has, we'll pause there for a second, and I'll come back to that after I kind of build my model here. So digital streaming now has increased and in some sense saved the music industry a little bit, in that the total revenues for the music industry have increased, right? So after the terminal decline from the year 2000 to the year 20, the bottom there, the nadir in 2014, revenues for the total industry have increased, and that's almost entirely due to the streaming revolution of Spotify, mostly Spotify, but Apple Music, moving away from iTunes, et cetera, et cetera. So there is growth. I'm sure a lot of people have the question of like, where is the money going? We'll talk about that. So let's go back to the kind of utopian vision of the internet music economy, as I call it. So this is how Lefsetz in the quote was imagining the internet economy would work. And to a certain extent, I guess, how Daniel Ek thinks the internet works, I guess, when he's writing his letters or doing his PR. And in this model, we have music makers on one side, it's very clear as day, and we have music listeners on the other side. The internet helps people find each other and they get together, money is exchanged, music is listened to, and everybody is happy. This is, and I just want to make sure that my cute diagrams are updating here, right?
They are, we're seeing them.
Okay, great.
And they're very cute too.
I won't move the window. That's what I think messed things up. Great. Obviously, though, there's something missing from this diagram, which is where is Spotify itself in our initial diagram? Yeah, when we add Spotify itself into our diagram of how the internet is working for music streamers and music makers, we get something like much more like this, which you might start to realize is looking like something that we might call a monopoly, and I would use that word. Or if it's not a monopoly, these are companies that are striving to become monopolies of music, basically. Now, again, this is an oversimplified example. Spotify is the industry leader in terms of paid subscriptions. They are not the industry leader in terms of who is streaming the most music, because the company that's doing that is actually YouTube still. So YouTube streams the most music of all companies, and they're not even really what we would think of as in the music business entirely. Oh, here we go. There's Spotify democratizing the music industry. So here's a more complicated network diagram, still obviously an abstraction and a simplification of what's going on. But you can start to see here and think about, well, who's in competition for what, and what are these companies actually doing, right? So they're in competition for eyeballs and user time, and they're in competition with each other to get the most user time. The crucial thing here to realize is they're not really in competition for the music. The content that I assume most people here are most interested in is more or less just available to all of them, right? So the musicians have no bargaining power in this network because, I mean, yes, there's some famous stories. Taylor Swift, even the most powerful musicians, Taylor Swift, most famous of the world kind of thing, can get up and protest and say, I'm not going to put my music on Spotify, but she caved in 2017 herself. Now her whole library is on Spotify as well. So clearly there's something going on where it's like, okay, one artist doesn't go on one of these, takes their music off one of these services, there's not much you can do. And that's kind of the bind that small labels and stuff, especially, and small composers, self-released artists are in here, because what are you going to do? Take your music off Spotify? You lose their audience. They're also the added complexity of them being in competition for those advertising dollars, and I could say much more about that. It's a whole extra discussion about the distorting influence of advertising. I'm going to focus mainly on Spotify now because that's what we're talking about. That's like what's ruling the day. But the other thing that we have to realize here to kind of grasp what's going on is the truly astounding amount of content. I hate to use that word, but I can use music for Spotify because it's mostly music, although even they are getting into the podcast business and paying for podcasts in a way they're not paying for music. Interesting. Obviously YouTube has it, but there's a lot of music. I mean, Spotify today, as of 2021, has said they get 60,000 new tracks of music uploaded a day. which is just hard to wrap your mind around. I mean, I do these back of the, oops, hopefully you see these stats. Back of the napkin calculations, 60,000 tracks is 3.5 minutes per track, 3,500 hours of music uploaded a day. Spotify doors that, sorry, YouTube doors that with 720,000 hours of content uploaded a day. So this is what our graph really looks like. And given that, you can see that it gets really depressing when you start calculating the amount of revenue these companies are actually generating per the amount of content they're sharing. It's actually really quite low. So I mean, I'm going to just jump through this kind of quickly, but if you like calculate by hour uploaded to YouTube, the money, even though YouTube is generating ad revenue of almost $20 billion, that works out to $40.17 that they're paying out per hour of new content uploaded to YouTube. Now you can think about how much work goes into creating an hour of music, what your prospects of making any money from YouTube are with that. Spotify is much better because of their subscription model, generates much more revenue per hour of uploaded content. They had annual revenue of 7.88 billion with 5 billion paid out. So for each new hour of music, that is in the thousands at least per year. So I like to imagine we could have a payout method here where you get 4,000, you write an hour of music, and if they paid up front and in advance, you could get $4,000 from Spotify. That would be purely egalitarian. It's still not a lot though, if you really think about it and the cost of producing an hour of music at a commercially like professional level. $4,000 for your one-time payment is still pretty low. The pure egalitarian equality-based method here would be, they say they have 3 million artists right now. I assume that's growing by the day as well. But you know, if we just took their pot of royalty money and divided it up equally to everybody, and with no regard to how much music got played, well, that you would get 1,600. And really quickly, the Union of Musicians and Allied Workers proposal of a cent per stream. Well, okay, say you're a big time small avant-garde artist with 1,000 streams per month, which is actually pretty good for some of the more esoteric stuff out there. Current average payout per stream is 0.004 cents per stream. So the current system gets you $4 per month. If you got a cent per stream, that would be a 250% increase, or $10 per month per stream, getting 1,000 streams per month. Now, meanwhile, this would also put Spotify out of business, which maybe is the point, but they're already losing money. But if we increase their $5 billion royalty payment by 2.5 to 12.5, I won't have time to explain reading a financial sheet here, but you know, we're going to go from their current losses of 293 million a year in 2020 would jump to 7.7 billion a year. It would not be a sustainable model for them. They're not really trying to do that. They're trying to become monopolists. So in wrapping up, just to get to the kind of conclusion here, the object should be to find ways that we need to increase our bargaining power, and this might not be conducive to the model of the universal music accessibility. I mean, that's the paradox of the internet fundamentally, I think. Like, do we have universal music accessibility through that will necessarily result in these kind of monopolistic behaviors, or do we find ways to capture those companies? So if it were up to me, the company itself is not, the royalty stream rate is not really a viable solution to even be talking about. What we need to be talking about is increasing the bargaining power of the musicians. Spotify isn't really like effectively a record company like we think of it. That's not what it is. It is the music economy. And is that music, so should that music economy itself be run and owned by one person, or the major labels and there's minority stakes plus one person? Or is it the economy? In which case we should be talking about democratizing Spotify itself and giving, breaking up these monopolies, or giving a bargaining chip to the artists where they have to actually pay up front. That would make them gatekeepers again, but it would increase the royalty rates. And that's I don't know. I don't actually know what I think about that. Or do we consider that these companies are really more of a public utility, in which case we need a more democratic governance system, and we need to talk about other ways that the revenues need to be divided up for the artists. I did want to just say, just to close, and this is the philosophical question that we do have to think about: what is the value of 1,000 streams, really, and who is it valuable to? I know it doesn't seem a lot if you're talking like Ed Sheeran's or Drake's, the real like people that are actually making money from streaming digital economy. That's one thing, but I do think 1,000 streams a month for some strange esoteric music of the world, like that's a significant amount. 12,000 people listening to your album in a year, or 12,000 listens, even if it's one person that listened to your album 12,000 times, I think that's meaningful. And we need to talk and really think seriously about ways that we can make that a sustainable thing to produce for artists. Otherwise, you know, where if the record sale itself can't sustain or even contribute really to the production of the album, who is going to finance that album? And this is the situation we're in. It's going to be self-financed, and that moves all the risk back to musicians, and that's the world we live in. Anyway, I know it's a lot, and it's kind of a spiel, so I'm wrapping up, and I'm sure people have like head explode questions, and I couldn't even get into everything I would normally want to talk about in 20 minutes. But if you want to like get angry or tell me I'm wrong, because it is kind of controversial what I've been saying here, I hope to have a few minutes anyway, if I'm allowed to respond.
Sure, yeah, we have time for a few questions. I've definitely been on a roller coaster of emotions in the past 20 minutes. And I'm
sorry I don't have the, like, it's like we need to be thinking, I guess if I have a point in the end, that's not the solution. It's just the solution is we need to like move up levels and really how we're thinking about solutions here. Like this is a bigger, like the problem is the construction of the system itself. And that can't be solved by the way really you individually release your record, is kind of my current philosophy about this.
And we do have a question here asking, what are your thoughts on self-producers of music putting their music on the streaming services versus just putting music on Bandcamp or selling privately?
Well, yeah, so I think, okay, so I know this wasn't really a how-to seminar, but yes, that is what you really must do right now, I would say. You will make much more money off of Bandcamp, even, promise me, even if you get like 1,000 streams, like I'm saying, which is nothing, I don't consider that anything to sneeze at, you'll make no money from that. But if you sell 5 downloads on Bandcamp, you'll make much more money than those 1,000 streams from Spotify right now. So like, the problem is most people don't really know. And I have students these days, like coming up, like all my students, undergrads that are 20 years old right now, they listen, you know, the only way they really listen to music is YouTube or Spotify. I have to tell them what Bandcamp is. Other musicians tend to know what Bandcamp is, but it doesn't have big market penetration outside of that kind of small sphere. We need to find ways to increase that, I would say. That's the challenge. I mean, honestly, there's kind of like camps of solutions I have in mind, but it's kind of like, do we want, I don't like using these words entirely. I think these concepts are overused to describe the modern economy that doesn't really exist in the mind of Marx. But like, you know, do we have capitalist solutions or do we have more socialist, anti-capitalist solutions to these problems? A more capitalist solution is about breaking up the monopoly and having more smaller streamers that are maybe more specific, or at least kind of channels of music. I mean, this is how movie streaming has fixed the problem to an extent, although we'll see if it's completely fixed. But you know, you have to subscribe to a lot of different things and they have more exclusive content. We have nothing like that in music, right? Every service has every musician. If we want to collectively act and say, no, we're going to like all move, we're going to create new music Bandcamp and all new music is really there and that's where everybody goes and it's a musician run thing. I could foresee, I don't know how to get there politically or like how we create that, but I could see that being much more advantageous to the music creator and hopefully not that bad for the consumer. But I don't know, it's really hard to figure out how to break the monopoly without really government stepping in. I mean, it's the only way I could really see this actively happening, but we could break Spotify, but let's just stop the next one right now.
Right. Yeah. So many
anyway,
thoughts.
I know I know it's just a lot. So thank you guys.
But thank you so much.
You can read my writings and you can find me and seek me out if you want to talk about this. I can talk about this stuff all day, obviously.
Great. Thank you so much, Ben. As the same with Robert and Kinaidd, we could stay here forever. But thank you to the 3 of you for making yourselves also available after this panel. We really appreciate that. And I'm going to welcome our last panelist for today, who's Garrett Schumann. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you so much for having me. And also, I want to, first of all, I have goosebumps, Ben, after your presentation. And I want to compliment the New Music Gathering organizers for structuring the session like this, because even though I'm talking about local government, the second half of my presentation could tie into what is that big solution. So I'm really thrilled to be part of this panel, and I'm just so happy to be here. I was reflecting on the fact I presented at the first New Music Gathering, and it's great to be here 6 years later. So, and I presented in between too. So a little bit about my presentation. So my name's Garrett Schumann. I'm a composer. I'm also a concert presenter, presenting organization executive director. I live in Southeast Michigan. And I'm going to be talking, my talk has 2 parts. I'm going to be discussing my experience on my city's art commission and how, based on my experience, you can take advantage of your local arts commission to support what you're doing. But then I'm going to zoom out a lot bigger. And this is what I was just intimating, and talk a little bit about modern monetary theory and how we can have progressive federal arts funding in the United States. And it's definitely a utopian vision for sure. But let's start small with local government. So I live in Ypsilanti, Michigan. That is our famous water tower. It's on my shirt. you can see that we are a pretty small city, and we're located in Washtenaw County in Southeast Michigan. For those of you who know the area, you know we're right next to Ann Arbor. Ann Arbor is a much bigger city with more resources. And we're also about 35 miles west of Detroit. Okay. So the City of Ypsilanti Art Commission was formed in November 2019 via an ordinance, and I'm one of the inaugural commissioners. There was an open application, and the City Council, the mayor nominated 9 of us. The City Council approved us unanimously because they were like, we've never had one of these, so it doesn't, you know, we'll just, whoever wants to do it can do it. Here's the description of what the committee's supposed to do from the city website. I wanted to highlight a couple things because, like in most situations with municipal government working with the arts, there's a lot of interest in connecting arts to business, so supporting business with the arts, and that's an important thing to think about when you work with your local government and the arts. Here's more from the ordinance that created the commission. Oh, I just wanted to say, of the 9 commissioners, 5 are women, 4 are men, and 3 of the commissioners are women of color. Ypsilanti is a pretty diverse city. It was very important to the city council that the Arts Commission reflect that, and I give the city government a lot of credit in designing it in that way. You can see from our purpose that we are an advisory body and that we do not actually do art making. We support art making in various ways. We provide guidelines for art making. And it's important before you work with your local art commission to understand what the ordinance wants it to do, so that you can make sure you're asking for something that is within its purview. So here's a little bit of what we've done since our first meeting in June of 2020. We didn't have any meetings in the first few months of the pandemic. And you can see from this that we have sort of 2 kinds of work that we're doing, not including administrative stuff like writing bylaws, because there had never been an arts commission before last year. One of the types of work we've done is supporting, providing specific guidance to arts projects, public arts projects in the community. So that relates to these Black Lives Matter street mural project that I'll show you a picture of, this school art banner project, and then also supporting the outdoor stages that have been doing concerts during the pandemic. We've also been trying to connect more with resident artists in our city and support them in different ways. So this is when we had Andre Dowell from the Sphinx organization come talk. He lives in Ypsilanti. And then also we've been working on developing a community arts survey that would help us understand the art consuming and art making community in Ypsilanti, like get that in hard data because we don't have that. So here are pictures of the Black Lives Matter street mural project that we supported. And here on the left, in the top right corner of that picture, this is the best one I could find. You can see some of these art banners that were put up. And then we also have some pictures here of the outdoor stages that the city has sponsored. Speaking of the music work that the commission has done, you know, this is a small fraction of the outdoor performances that have been happening. And so I just wanted to acknowledge that what we have done does not constitute all the art making that has happened since the commission has been in existence. So let's talk a little bit about money and its relationship to the Ypsilanti Art Commission, because that's the theme of the conference. So the City of Ypsilanti Art Commission does not have a budget at this point. So other art commissions do. As we were learning how to operate as a commission, we looked at the policy documents defining the boundaries of other commissions. We looked at the Minneapolis Arts Commission policy documents from 2007, which are old, but it's a bigger city. They have their own budget. So when you approach your local art commission, assuming you have one, you need to understand what its budgetary situation is. But this doesn't mean we have nothing to do with getting money for projects. We can endorse projects to get funding from the city directly, and we can also help projects raise money privately by endorsing the project. We can also make performance, we've also done a lot to help make performance opportunities specifically more accessible to artists. And with these outdoor stages, there was a big, before the Art Commission was involved, there was a big problem with business owners monopolizing who got to play. And so we intervened to make it a little bit more egalitarian. So if you work with your local arts commissions, here are some ways that you can approach them to get funding for your project. So you can apply or appeal for direct funding either from City Council through your art commission as the system works in Ypsilanti, or directly from the Art Commission as it works in Minneapolis or maybe a larger city. You could encourage your art commission to act as a re-granting agency. So this is something that the Ypsilanti Art Commission would like to do in the future. And I think there are a lot of advantages to having a cultural re-granting agency seated in city government because it's more accessible than maybe some private organizations. And then, like I said, you can use the recommendation or endorsement of your local art commission to strengthen your private fundraising and develop your pitch, which we have done with other projects who have come before us. Here are some things I recommend you do before you start engaging with your local arts commission. First, attend a meeting just to see what it's like, especially if you can attend a meeting where someone else is proposing a project for your art commission to support so that you can see what works well in that context. I would also say read the ordinances and policies so you know what your art commission is able to support. So the Minneapolis documents from 2017, their definition of public art does not include music specifically. Ypsilanti's does, which is good, but you want to make sure if you're a musician, is the Art Commission designed to support the work that you do? And if it's not, you should advocate that they change the language. And I would look into other projects that your commission has supported. And I also recommend serving or getting to know commissioners just to see the mechanics of the infrastructure for local government support of art making in your community, and also to be a voice of change or to represent musicians. I'm the only musician on the Ypsilanti Art Commission, and often, as I've suggested, music and performing arts can be overlooked in favor of visual art, and when it comes to public art projects, and so it can be very valuable, I think, to have musicians and performers on art commissions. Our needs are a lot different because we're not creating, static pieces that will go up in a public space. Like it's just different. And so I highly recommend serving or using the public comment period to try to advocate for changes in your art commission. Here's some challenges that you'll probably run into working with your local art commission, but they're not that hard to overcome if you know what to expect. Oh, there we go. So art commissions work really slowly. This has been a really frustrating part of my experience being on the commission in Ypsilanti. I highly recommend approaching your local art commission 6 to 9 months in advance of when your project is happening, because it can take a really long time. As the description for the Ypsilanti Art Commission showed, business interest is a really influential force in municipal government's relationship to the arts. Bear that in mind. It is something that it doesn't necessarily need to be an impediment, but it will be a presence that you want to work with. Also, government makes mistakes. So in Ypsilanti, we've had miscommunications between city council and us that have impacted some of the projects that we've done. Just understand that it could happen. And then like approaching any group of people to support your project, if it's a contemporary music project, they probably don't know a lot about what you do. I found with my concert presenting organization, Apex Contemporary Performance, we perform really esoteric repertoire. It's not a problem. I find it kind of liberating that I don't need to justify pieces on an aesthetic or reputational level because the people I'm talking to have no idea what I'm talking about. But you need to find connections to the community that can be meaningful and communicable to people who are not specialists. And that can be a challenge, but once you figure it out, you shouldn't have any problems. Okay, so now we're going to zoom out to the second half of the presentation, just talk about money in the arts, public money in the arts in the United States, and I'll present my utopian vision for what we can do, maybe solve some of the problems that Ben was talking about with the streaming industry. So we all know that we always want to find more money for the arts. In terms of public money in the United States for the arts, I was surprised to find that local government already contributes most of the public funding for the arts, 61%. I also want to point out that that overall number, $1.3 billion, is pitifully small. If the US spent commensurately to Europe, the average amount that European countries do, 0.6% of their GDP, total public arts funding would be 100 times more, which is really significant. But we all know that America needs to spend more money on the arts, and so I won't belabor that point. Okay, so if you've sought funding for a music project, you know about the sort of status quo is this patchwork of government and private sources that we have. And I really recommend Will Robbins' book, Industry, to see how we got to this point with in the 80s and 90s, the lessening of public money for music and the increasing dependence on sort of the marketplace of private donations. And the problem with, even though this status quo is pretty robust to support a lot of great work, it has a lot of limitations because it's a really small space financially. And so there are a lot of funding, whether it's from a state, like a state level governmental source, or a private donation, has stipulations that restrict how people who receive the money can use it. And to illustrate this, this is a screenshot from New Music USA's website, from their funding FAQs. And these are the geographical restrictions on the money that they had to give out. And someone who lives in Michigan, it's always kind of annoying to see all the limitations on it. But it's not, these are imposed on New Music USA by the system we have now. And so it makes sense. So I don't blame New Music USA. I think Vanessa Reed is in the audience. I do not blame you for this. It's just the way things are. So state, local, and private funders have to have limits like this because their resources are finite. And in addition to geographic restrictions, there are other barriers to access that are more invisible, that narrow the field of applicants to begin with. These include complicated and time-consuming applications. And I want to draw on this idea from Elizabeth F. Cohen's book, The Political Value of Time, which is really about the carceral state and immigration system in the United States. But I do think there is something similar about how when we use barriers of time, either how long it takes to do an application, how much time you need to be able to commit to finding funding sources, or just deadlines, we end up cutting out a lot of people from accessing resources that it's not something as obvious as a geographic restriction. So the answer, if state, local, and private arts funders have limited resources, how do we get more money? And how do we solve the problem? And the answer I'm going to propose to you is the federal government. The government is our friend, and it can support local things, and it can support private donors and all of that as well. So I want to talk about modern monetary theory a little bit, because I think this concept is really empowering to envisioning a new approach to public arts funding in the United States. So modern monetary theory is not a new idea, but it's gained popularity recently because it re-envisions the way we think about how the US government spends money. So the US government I recommend Stephanie Kelton's book, The Deficit Myth, to really learn about this. I'm gonna do a brief overview. Hold on. I just wanted to make sure none of those chat things were about something going wrong. So basically, the US government is a monopoly as a currency issuer. So we think of the traditional view or the contemporary view of like how the US government spends money is that it has to either tax or borrow to get the money that it spends, but that's not actually how it works. It just creates the money first, spends it, and then taxes and borrows after the fact. And what's important to understand is that the US government can never run out of money because it creates all of the money that it spends, taxes and borrows. So the liberating part of this concept is that we don't need to justify being able to afford things because there's no financial limit on how much money the government can spend on things. There are real economic limits like inflation and productivity, but those boundaries are a lot farther away than we think they are. And so what's great about this is it's not really what can the government afford to do with its money, it's what does it want to spend on, and it changes the argument that we need to make when we advocate for increased funding. It's not justifying why it's worth the money, it's really trying to get people to explain why are we not prioritizing providing the resources people obviously need. Now, in a world where the federal government is spending more on the arts, what I would propose is not making the NEA huge, the National Endowment for the Arts huge. There are a couple of reasons for this. First, as Will Robin describes, in industry, one of the political arguments made to limit the NEA's funding by Ronald Reagan was that it was crowding out private donors. I do think its budget should be increased, but I don't think we should build out a federal bureaucracy for arts and music funding. I think we should use federal spending to support the existing administrative state at the local level and through private systems in order to give them the money, the resources they need, and also to give them the support they need to make those resources more accessible to people. So we can take the pressure off state, local, and private funders who have limited resources. We can use federal spending to alleviate that pressure, and then that can make it possible for their resources to become more accessible. So I would say in addition to directly funding artists and organizations, federal spending could prioritize reforms to make funding more accessible. This is including subsidizing local, state, and private budgets so that they can offer more money, and also funding support staff for like art commissions or nonprofit art organizations so that they can change the way their application systems work, so they don't need deadlines, they don't need complicated applications to limit the pool so that their staff can has the capacity to review applications. If we had a fully staffed system of arts funding reviewers, I mean, imagine if there were people whose job was to look for opportunities and reach out to you and tell you, hey, I think you would be a good fit for this. And what I envision is something similar to the idea of postal banking, which is a sort of populist reform concept for access to financial services, where it uses local infrastructure that's already there at post offices and expands what it offers in terms of financial services to make the banking system more accessible, specifically for communities that are geographically separated from banks or don't have a history culturally with the banking system, or would traditionally be excluded for various reasons. And so I think something like that, using increased federal spending to support the local infrastructure that's already doing a really, really good job, but just doesn't have enough resources. That's sort of the utopian vision I have in mind. And certainly, like I said at the beginning, we could throw some of those federal dollars at Spotify or the streaming system and fix that too, why not? So, okay, that is the end of my presentation. Thank you so much for hearing me dream about a different world of supporting the arts, and I hope we have a good conversation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Garrett. Folks, if you have any questions, pop them on the Q&A, and if panelists also, if you have any questions. Yes. This is this was so, well, it's what I needed to hear. So thank you for that. And I know this was Lainey's, the credit goes to Lainey's multitasking brain that to put you all together in this panel, but I definitely echoes Garrett's initial words about the 4 panelists we had. And even though they seemed like they were, looking at the schedule, I was like, oh, these are all very different things, and they are, but the way they each connect to each other has been really, really great to watch. Let's see if anyone has any questions. Yes, thank you, Garrett. Everyone's thanking you. Any questions from either attendees or panelists?
I see one in the
Oh,
Q&A.
yeah. I might be, oh, sorry. I have it on my other screen. That's why I don't see it. Thank you. So I see here, can you comment on how the personnel of local arts councils are formed, either in your experience or in your observations and research? Are there efforts to have council members be representative of various industry sectors? And what efforts are made to diversify the makeup of arts councils along the lines of race, gender, and sexuality?
So I will talk about the Ypsilanti Art Commission that I'm a part of. I think that it's totally possible that other commissions are designed with this in mind, but possibly because it was formed in 2019, it was, and we live in a very, Washtenaw County, my county, is the leftiest county in Michigan. So we have a pretty progressive mindset, but part of the way, so there was definitely an eye towards having people with different professional backgrounds and also identities on the panel, but it was also very specifically designed so that people from different parts of the city, so our city is broken into wards, so there was a quota for each ward for having how, you could only have 2 people from a ward. And so this helped divide it geographically, which in our city, like many cities, geographical divisions equates to identity and socioeconomic divisions as well. And also we have a township, which is not part of the city surrounding us. There's one person who is not from the city, who's from the township. We're supposed to have also youth members who are non-voting, but we haven't ever had one at a meeting, so I don't know what happened with that. But to answer your question, Hubert, there were really intentional choices were made to make sure that the Art Commission was representative of certain groups. I think that I don't know about specific aims in terms of sexuality and gender, but I know with the geographical quotas that would certainly account for socioeconomic differences and also racial differences with the way that our city is laid out due to historical hierarchies of oppression in the United States. I don't know about other arts commissions, but I can't imagine we're the only one designed in this way.
Thank you. And Ben is also seconding the reading of about the MMT. Anyone else has any other questions for Garrett?
I think Kinaidd raised his hand.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Yeah, hello, it's Kinaidd again. I moved throughout my house. So overwhelmingly, themed and immersive experiences tend to be privately funded or funded by direct consumers. And they tend to be really like they tend to like be very cross silo. They tend to have a lot of like cross pollination, cross collaboration, and it's kind of difficult to explain in terms of to a government agency what we're trying to do. In a lot of cases, like, so I guess like the model you've discussed really works for like traditional art and really works for like established art making practices, but how do we convince agencies to invest in experiences, I guess, is the big question, rather than just individual arts project based on their own merit?
I think that's a great question. I would say if you were trying to pitch something like that to the Art Commission I am a part of, I would say the big thing would be bringing stakeholders from the community in on your project before you go to the government and say, so if it's, I kind of relate it to like, if I wanted to present, like, I'm actually working on a project to do a Xenakis performance. There was a Xenakis piece premiered in Ypsilanti in the 60s or something. It's kind of wild. And like that music is extremely inaccessible to like city council, but I can say that it has a connection to this place. And for you with like a themed experience that is hard to explain or even anticipate what it's like because it's pushing these boundaries of traditional performance, I would say, you know, I would bring in community partners like businesses or a venue or something like that. And I would say, we want to try something different. We have these stakeholders, X, Y, and Z, who are on board, you know, try to definitely have some kind of community impact thing where like, oh, you know, we'll do, I don't know, you know, this is an imaginary event. So I don't know if you can make it free or if you can give some kind of preview or behind the scenes sort of presentation that could be like an outreach or education event, like some sort of community dividend in that way. That's really what these the government and commissions like the one I'm on are looking for, more so than achieving some kind of specific aesthetic aim. Now, I will say there are people who do think the point of an art commission is to advance some kind of specific aesthetic agenda. I find that pretty repellent because I don't know if, I don't believe that's how power should be used in situations like this. But I wouldn't worry so much about persuading them on the merits of some kind of experimental performance form, as long as you can show that it's going to, like, it has a connection to the community or will create a connection point for the community in some way. I think that's the big question that government, local government people are trying to answer in order to justify the expenditure or something like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Garrett. Yeah, and I think actually the experiential immersive part of that could be something that could be used to the advantage to something that a lot of organizations are looking for. So maybe that's something that,
especially if it's something space-based. So like if you can create a themed immersive event that uses like an open space, like that's gold. Like they will love that. I mean, that's also something that art commissions are that concept of like using public space as a medium for public art is a very by the book basic part of art commission work, like using visual art in that way. And actually a challenge with performing arts, traditional performing arts, is you need physical infrastructure to have traditional performing arts. You need stages, you need physical infrastructure to bring it into the public. Something that is experimental and immersive and using the features of a space that's already there. You could do much more than what we've been able to do to this point, which is just like invest in stages that can go up and then people can do a traditional concert. Like something that's more experimental would actually be a lot easier to pull off. So I would really encourage something like that.
Well, and investing in those stages is kind of a moot point anyway. Well, I mean, it's poor. It's not ideal because like whenever you assign an audience a specific place to be and a performer a specific place to be, you're automatically invoking the idea of proscenium, and you're automatically invoking this idea that it's not immersive and that it's not approachable. Okay, yeah, I could definitely see how that would be.
I know, I totally get where you're coming from. I'll just counter with the idea behind the outdoor stages that have been put up, and there have been other outdoor performances happening besides the ones I showed pictures of, is part of the transformation of like roadways into pedestrian spaces. And so it is part of a less exciting transformation of how the space is used. Or there's one in a park that has had an unused amphitheater, and that has been cleaned up and is now being used. So it is not, I totally agree that it's not reinventing the way the audience experiences this space through performance. You're totally right about that. But in the context of our town, it is changing the way people interact with these spaces, which is good, but not as not nearly as not transcendent in the way you're talking about. I totally acknowledge that. So.
Thank you so much again, Garrett, and thank you to Kinaidd, to Ben, Robert, all the wonderful panelists that shared their insight over the past 2 hours. Thank you so much, folks that are joining us for this. I am gonna encourage you to visit us if you want to continue the conversation. You can join us in Gather Town. The password is the same one that you used for this session, if which you get with registering for a new music gathering. And yeah, we would love to see you in about an hour for the YouTube concert, 1 p.m. Central Time. And yeah, for all the other panels and concerts that we have for the next 2 days until Wednesday. So thank you so much again for wonderful panelists, and thank you attendees for joining us. We will hopefully see you very soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Angelica.
Thank you. Ciao.